In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Daily Memphian Tigers podcast with yours truly, Greg Gaston. I'm joined by Parth Upadhyaya, the Tigers basketball beat writer, and Tim Buckley, the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer. What a bad week, to say the least, and I'm putting that kindly, as the Tigers went to Texas last week and lost 2 games, dropping a 10-point decision to North Texas and then getting walloped by SMU this past Sunday by 27 points. The Tigers now 18-8 overall. More importantly, they fall to 7-6 in American Conference play. That ties them for 6th entering play this week, tied with UAB, and make that North Texas and East Carolina. Remember, North Texas has the head-to-head win over Memphis. So things right now are at what seems like rock bottom, gentlemen. I don't know if it can get worse. I guess it can if they don't figure this thing out and win the conference tournament. But I think we're in agreement. The at-large chances are done, right? Absolutely done, Parth?
They're done completely. They're cooked. And they were getting there already, even before I headed to Dallas to cover those 2 games. But, man, that North Texas loss, I thought, put a fork in it. People said otherwise. And obviously the SMU loss, definitely, there's no debate that it is done at large.
Tim, it's hard to believe with 2 regular season games still remaining with Florida Atlantic that the Tigers are out of an at-large chance with 5 games still remaining.
When all this started, I kind of gave the brace yourself for the warning. You're not going to win every game. Like, you take a loss here, you take a loss there. Never did I envision 3 bad losses in a row and another loss to make it 4 in a row and 6 in their last 9. Like, I knew you're not going to run the table. You're going to take a loss here, you can take a loss there, but for it to just spiral like it did, it really is mind-boggling.
5 games remain in the regular season. Tomorrow being Wednesday versus Charlotte. Charlotte 11-2 and 17-8 overall. One of the big surprises in the conference. Sunday, a home game against Florida Atlantic, and then still to come at East Carolina, UAB at home, and at Florida Atlantic. Before we move along, I want to remind everybody that the 3 of us, along with our producer, Natalie Van Gundy, once again in 4 separate locations. Audio not as crisp as it usually is, but we're going to be back soon together. Kumbaya and all that good stuff. I know you know of the flooding that happened at the Daily Memphian, so that's why we are on 4 different locales for these last 3, 4, 5 podcasts. So again, bear with us, but I think it sounds for the most part pretty good, just not as exact as we want it to be. All right, I want to jump right into Parth's stories. A lot of stories, of course, at the Daily Memphian on the Tigers, does such a terrific job. But Parth, this story you wrote about Coach Hardaway in reactions to some things he said, not only after the game against SMU on Sunday, but after his radio show on Monday. And this is how you titled it. Hardaway believes he's a target, received unwarranted negativity. In what regards does he feel he's a target? Because the only target I see is when somebody takes personal shots at an individual. Right. I don't think people are taking personal shots. How do you see this?
No, I don't think so at all. He started off by saying, I think Jeff Brightwell, and I'm paraphrasing here, the host, asked something along the lines of, I know it's a tough time. I know it can be tough on your mental health while you're trying to get this, thing back in the right direction. And he said, I knew when I took this job that I'd be a target just because of who I am. I've gotten some criticism. He said some of it's fair, but a lot of it's, kind of unfair, I think is the word he used, or unwarranted. One of those words is the one he had. And then he went on to say that, he said, I put us in position, and I'm once again paraphrasing the exact quote. Greg, I'm not sure if you have that story up or not, but he said, I put us in position every night to win. I can't go out there and play as well, which I thought was just another example, man, of zero accountability. Like, some of that is his fault. Like, he brought the players in, he is the coach. He's expected to hold those guys accountable to, get them to do what he wants to do. That's part of coaching, right? Getting guys to do
absolutely
that you want to do. So I thought it was just another head scratching comment, man. And we've seen a bunch of these now.
Tim, he's a target because he's a coach. Coaches are always targets, but if it's fair criticism, to me, that isn't unwarranted. And I think a true fan doesn't sugarcoat things. They're honest in their assessment.
Very true. And you know what I don't really understand is how you can go into this thinking that, or at least appearing to act as if you think you are untouchable. Like
Right.
it comes with the territory. It just happens. And you're right, as long as it doesn't get personal, that's just part of it. And it doesn't matter if you're, you know, you've had a great NBA career and you're a four-time NBA All-Star, or if you never coached anything more than your kid's seventh grade basketball team. If you're coaching a team that was number 10 in the country and they're out of it, the top 25 before you can blink, there's going to be scrutiny that comes with that. And you just have to deal with it. And I mean, that in mind, it's, you know, I suppose the only advice you can give is, gosh, don't go coach in Philly.
Yeah, and forget the top
There's
25. This team's out of the top 100 almost. They're 91, 90th in Ken Pom. This team's almost not a top 100 team in the country. Forget 25.
Look, there are some people that feel that he is given a pass because if they don't go to the NCAA tournament, that means 6 seasons at the helm, 1 tournament victory. Josh Pastner coached 7 seasons, 4 appearances, 2 wins. He was only 2-5, mind you, but 2 wins in the NCAA tournament. He was fired. I know it's a different ballgame. This is the native son. This is the prodigal son who's here and doesn't want to go anywhere. And look, we are not going to argue this point, I don't believe, that he really does care about the program. He bleeds blue and gray. He wants the success of all those players and of that team. But he is not a Teflon Don. And I think the criticism is warranted because I don't hear people poking at the guy and who he is as a person. They're poking at what he's doing on the court, whether it's playing too many players, whether it's bringing players in 2-3 minutes into the game, whether it's the lack of defensive intensity. Parth, it's all that. And I think, again, it's fair for fans to criticize in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things were trending in the right direction after last year. I thought that team had no business being in the top 20 of Ken Pom and, you know, top 20 of the net like it was at the end of the season. Obviously, you know, things kind of imploded in that FAU game with, you know, chemistry issues and arguing on the bench and just guys not being together. But you figured, okay, like he's brought this loaded roster in. He can kind of build upon what was done the past 2 seasons. And obviously it looked that way at first and things have cratered. The bottom's fallen out, however you want to say it. So, yeah, I think he does deserve criticism for having what I think is still a lot of talent. I know people would disagree, but I still think it's a top 30 roster, at least in terms of talent, in terms of the guys. Like, not everybody has a Javon Quinterly or a Jaquan Walton. I know those guys haven't performed, but you know, look at the freaking conference. They got a bunch of, you know, really mid-major guys who were not ranked at all coming out of high school. We're not McDonald's All-Americans. We're not notable names. To be 7-6 in this conference, which is the 9th best in America, absolutely there's criticism that deserves to be, you know, given.
Tim, Penny said, this is a quote, "I put us in position to win every single night. I can't get out on the court and play as well." He's not taking any of the criticism, although every once in a while he throws in, "This one's on me." Yep. So he talks out of both sides of his mouth at times. But more than likely, he sort of throws the team under the bus. He doesn't throw an individual a la what Rick Pitino just did at St. John's. But I can't see this being anything positive for the morale of the team, for anybody, donors, to be honest with you, to look at this and go, come on, man, take some of the blame.
I think perhaps one of his biggest frustrations is, and this happens to ones who on a playing level were among the best of the best, when they can't get through to guys and make them do things that came innate to them, or, you know, make them perform like he knows they should be capable of, but he tries to pull every trigger and none of them's working. It frustrates the heck out of him. And that's probably where a lot of the sensitivity to the criticism comes. And back to the criticism just for a moment, not to belabor it, but I think a lot of the toughest criticism is coming from people who really do care too, because it's a passionate fan base. It's not malicious. It's caring criticism. And look, haters are always going to hate, but you have to recognize that things aren't going well when even some of the lovers are starting to hate a little bit too. Although by the same token, he's probably getting more support than a heck of a lot of coaches in America would be getting under this circumstance. So, you just gotta. I think that's probably one of his biggest frustrations, though, is that he just can't figure out how to get through to these guys. Now, look, I don't know. I'm one of those ones who I'm kind of tired of hearing the whole "how talented they are" thing, because, yeah, David Jones is offensively talented. We get it; he can score. That's what happens when you rarely pass the ball. Quinterly can't be talented when he wants to play. He's frustrated. I'm not seeing the talent lately. And beyond that, I'm sorry that it's not a team of 10 All-Americans. It's just that this might be one of the most overhyped teams in Memphis history, and that's saying a lot because they've had a ton of hyped teams.
Yeah, I'm also tired of hearing, and I know it's true. I know it's factual, but the Caleb Mills thing. What frustrates me the most, look, do they miss him? Yes, they miss him. But we're making it sound like by the end of the season, Caleb Mills would have been the next Michael Jordan, when people are talking about him. And if you can't replace a Caleb Mills with this, what we thought was and what was talked about, this incredibly deep, talented team, then what does it say about your depth, Parth, when you have one guy go down and now all of a sudden you forget how to play defense?
Yeah, not only depth, but what does it say about your culture? Penny said multiple times that Caleb Mills was the vocal leader, the locker room leader, the emotional leader. Like, if that guy's not there, Penny's got to step up and kind of give these guys some structure and appoint a new leader, or an assistant has to step up. Somebody has to step up. Somebody has to be like, the adult in the room, so to speak, even though all these guys are 25 years old. But man, like, something Penny said that stuck out to me after the SMU game was, and he was talking to, me and Jason Munns and other reporters. He said, you guys try to make it seem like this is all one team. No, this is two teams. There was a team that went, whatever he said, I think he said 11-2, in the non-con or whatever, 10-3, I'm sorry, that had Caleb Mills, that was together and was playing small ball. Then there's a next team, second team, that he said lost Caleb Mills, added Naquan Tomlin, and re-added Jordan Brown. I'm like, two of those three things were your decision. He chose to add Naquan Tomlin. He chose to bring back a guy who quit on the team. If you want to attribute that to some of the chemistry concerns, some of the turbulence, yeah, but those were your decisions. So that part is baffling too. Like, the kind of excuses, for lack of better terms, that are being made, that he quite frankly created.
I think he's setting up these excuses for when it doesn't happen at the end of the year if they don't make the tournament. Well, we were really, really good, as you just said, but then we lost Caleb. So that's why we're not that good right now. How about the other day when he said, and we're talking about Monday's practice, he said it last night at the radio show. He said we had either the best or one of the best practices we've had all year. He says that a lot. Yep. But to me, what that says is, okay, we've had a great practice. Game plan is ready to go. If they fall on their face Wednesday, it's a built-in excuse that, look, they didn't execute once again. And that's getting tiresome, Tim.
Yeah, that's just kind of getting ahead of the mess. And
right.
And we've heard it often. And again, it just goes to his frustration. He hasn't gotten through to these guys. And you know what? Maybe things have changed. Maybe it's tougher to get through to professionals than it is to get through to actual college kids, because that's what these guys are right now. And you know what? You coach differently in the NBA than you coach in college. You coach differently in, Euroball or G League or D League or CBA or whatever it is than you coach the old school college basketball team.
Mhm.
So maybe it's time to, you know, and I don't know that he isn't doing this, but maybe it's time to just start, you know, coaching them like pros. And, you can't release a guy, can't release half your team uh, because of NCAA rules. Well, you know what? You can't, release your team because of luxury tax rules if you're in the NBA either. You just, you figure out different combinations. Maybe it's a little tougher in college because you can't trade a guy. I'm sure he'd love to trade some of his guys right now, but um, you just you got to treat them like they're NBA guys. And if that means you take a guy who's making six figures in NIL money and he doesn't play a minute, so be it. But let's see if that happens not against Charlotte.
Well, I think to some extent he does. I mean, he runs an NBA system. And then Parth, I'm not sure if you asked the question. I don't know when it happened, but Malcolm Dandridge pretty much said, he gives us carte blanche. What is that? We pretty much can do whatever we want. And then he kind of pulled back from it.
Yeah, he said it. It wasn't anybody in the local media. He said it to ESPN.
Okay.
I believe it was at the halftime of the North Texas game. I think it might have been Lauren Luber from the AAC. Yeah, she asked him. The question was, and I'm paraphrasing. What is it that you like about what do you like about playing for Penny so much? Like, what's your favorite part about playing for Penny? And he said, as long as we take care of our obligations on the defensive end, we can kind of do whatever we want on the offensive end. Like that's kind of alarming or telling, or however you want to phrase that. And that's kind of some of the issue, right? Like these guys have too much freedom. Like the other day against SMU, I was baffled that he didn't pull Javon Quinterly. I was watching the game last night again. I got through, I think, the entire first half in about 10 minutes of a second. And the announcers are talking about, this guy's essentially quit. They were calling out, I believe it was Javon Quinterly and Jaquan Wall and a couple others. But man, it was evident. Like when Naquan Tomlin had that steal and nobody else touches the ball and JQ lets it fly from, NBA range 3-point land. And we saw multiple examples of that, not just shooting threes, but, tying your shoes on an offensive possession when Naquan Tomlin's trapped in that corner, or, not even making your way to the other end of the court to play defense and watching your team play 4-on-5. He was never pulled. So I think, to Tim's point, that's something that I want to see against Charlotte. Like, is he actually going to go with the guys that have that care factor, that factor for Memphis and for the city, as Penny said so often?
All right, I want
to just to be clear though, Dandridge did, that was Dandridge's essential response, and Quinterly has said the same thing, that Penny just lets us play, and they like that. But just for the record, Dandridge did not go with the 17th century French and pull out the carte blanche. That was all Greg Gaston.
But to that point, if it is true, they're not playing defense. So they shouldn't have the freedom to do whatever they want on offense. And that's also a frustrating thing. I don't want to go down that road again. We've done that already about the offense, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of dribbling, a lot of, let's have David Jones pull it out, because David Jones can do that. Or Quinterly, when he was playing well or better earlier in the season, hitting those game-winning threes. But for the most part, it's an offense that doesn't have a lot of structure. There's not a lot of play calls. There's not a lot of high screens and stuff like that. All right, I want to, before we talk about the Charlotte game and what we can expect to see the rest of the way, I want to go back to the point that Tim made about NIL, because I've had some people ask me or make a statement that they think that NIL could be the problem, that there's jealousy among players on the team because some are making a certain amount and some aren't. Well, my retort is always, the beginning of the season, they all seem to be kumbaya and play with chemistry. So if there was going to be an issue with NIL, wouldn't it have reared its ugly head at the beginning of the season? Or are they just finding out details about everybody and what their structure of their NIL is? Why do you think there's anything that has to do with NIL being an issue for the problems that the team has gone through recently, Parth?
I don't know if NIL in particular, but it's kind of part of the bigger picture of the culture, right, of college athletics, and the problem when you bring in these guys who don't know each other in the transfer portal and they're all big names. I think it's NIL. I think it's role. I mean, we've seen, not to single this guy out because it's been multiple people, but Jaquan Walton, I think he expected to be either the first or second fiddle. And when he realized he was third, if not fourth, he kind of checked out. And we've seen him check out for at least 2, if not 3 games now. Then there's the dynamic between Javon Quinterly and David Jones that's been playing out kind of this back half of the season where, at times we don't know who the alpha is. And they don't seem to know either. So I think all of that. And yeah, Greg, you're right. Maybe there was, or maybe there have been details disclosed in the locker room about who makes what and, who's gotten what car, whatever they get. And that couldn't have helped either.
Of course.
It's on Facebook. Like their salaries are on Facebook.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
But who posted those?
Salaries are on Facebook.
It's on. My mom was reading me how much those guys made last night.
Who posted on Facebook?
I'd love to know. But you know what? If that's what their problem is, they need to get over it if they think that they're going to play at the pro level because welcome to the NBA. One guy's making the minimum and, wondering how much of an apartment he can afford. And the other guy's living, in a $1 zillion mansion and making crazy money. Like that's just how the world works.
Yeah, Tim, but when the guy that's making crazy money is not playing defense or rebounding and taking wild sporadic shots, and that's a problem. I can see why somebody would look at,
oh yeah,
they're not going to say a name, but ex-player and say, hey, his bag is enormous and he's not doing anything while I'm sticking my nose in there and getting rebounds. What's going on?
Plus, every school is going through this. I'm sure at UConn, there's a guy, Klingen's probably making this amount, and another guy's making that amount, and they seem to be fine. So some teams have been able to overcome that. Others have not. And then I think taking into consideration here also, you have a voice like Dan Hurley. I'm not saying Penny Hardaway is very much mild-mannered, a little bit more boisterous in practices, but he's no Danny Hurley. I'm not saying to be, the days of Bob Knight are gone. But I think there has to be a happy medium between somebody who's a friend and you want your guys to succeed and you're going to do everything to help them, to also you're their boss, man. And if they're not performing, you got to call them out on it. And I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but there has to be something in the middle, I think, because you can't have play. And I'm not saying players are walking on Penny. They're not walking all over him. But, when Hurley speaks, I think there's a little scare factor in it. And I wouldn't mind a little of that from Penny every once in a while. Tim?
I was just trying to get onto Facebook to see what their salaries were. Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, the whole thing's just a mess. Look, the whole NIL and the portal happening at the same time it addressed needs because they had to figure out some way to get those kids some money because the NCAA wasn't going to do right by them.
Right. And
but
we're in agreement on that, right?
When you did both at the same time and the NIL just like came as hard as it did in as short amount of time as it did, and it was kind of the Wild West out there as far as rules go, it just overcomplicated everything. It took a problem and instead of solving it, it made it 10 times worse.
There's no question about it, but some have been able to navigate it a little bit better. But until the NCAA comes out with reform, it is a mess. It's an absolute mess. All right.
Greg, why some have been able to navigate it better? It's because coaches recruit. They don't get all alphas. They don't get all scorers. They don't get all shooters. They get guys that, okay, this is our alpha, whether it be last year Kendrick Davis. This is our secondary guy, DeAndre Williams. And then we've got tiers. We've got a pecking order so that when guys come in and they're not getting 20 shots a game, they realize, hey, I'm not a 20 shot per game guy. When they're not getting $800,000 in NIL and driving a BMW, they realize I'm not a BMW guy at this school because not everybody can be, to Tim's point.
Yes, but do you think it's more – so you think the problems are more because of the team format – not the team format, but the team makeup?
Yeah, the roster structure, the team makeup, and overall the culture and the accountability. I think that's kind of lacked. And, for Penny, it's worked before where you've kind of empowered the players and had them lead. But, when you've got Kendrick Davis yelling at folks on the court and in the locker room, that's a hell of a lot more effective than anything anybody's doing on this team.
Absolutely. I'll say this real quick, Tim, and I'll give you the floor. But, yes, you have to have a floor general. You have to have a leader who's boisterous. Remember when the one game he didn't start Quinterly and he said Jaquan Walton? I asked him in the locker room before the game. I did that game, and he said, I said, is he able to communicate well and all that? He said, absolutely. He's not. So they don't really have that alpha dog out there as a leader, like you said, like Kendrick Davis was. They also don't, I still don't think they have enough shooters, and I think it's hard for him to get those shooters. And I think they also don't have enough dogs. And Malco's brought that up before. I don't think we're a physical team at all. And I think those are reasons why they've struggled a little bit on the court. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
I agree with like 90% of what Parth said earlier. I quibble with it a little bit, and I'll try and explain it this way. There are certain guys that they got out of the portal who I think saw an opportunity to both learn from Penny Hardaway, but also to ride one last chance to an NBA career. Because these guys weren't NBA guys when they came here in the summer. Otherwise, most of them would have already turned pro, and they didn't. So they wanted to elevate themselves personally. I think in that category is David Jones. In that category is Javon Quinterly. In that category is Jaquan Walton. And in that category is Jordan Brown.
Naquan Tomlin as well, but he joined mid-season.
Yeah, I'm taking him out of the equation because he wasn't part of the group that came over the summertime. Beyond that, I don't know that that's the case with those guys, whether it was Pierre or Young or whatever. Those guys were just looking to latch onto a nice program, kind of elevate themselves a step from where they were and be part of something, have the NCAA tournament experience and all of that. But when you've got at a minimum 4 guys, and I mean, it's kind of he stayed, but to an extent, you can throw Malcolm Dandridge. Like Malcolm Dandridge could have hung it up after last season, but he came back because he's loyal to Penny. He's in a sense loyal to Memphis. He got himself back in shape. He didn't get himself back in shape to be in the situation that they're in now. He got himself back in shape to get to the tournament and make some money on the pro level. So you got at least 4, maybe 5 guys who are thinking, I can use this to go pro, more than they're thinking, this is really cool. We have a great team here, a team that can do something in the tournament. And they're trying to elevate themselves rather than do it because they care about the collective, and that kills you.
Yes, but that's the selling point from Penny Hardaway. Come to my program. Yeah. And I'll help get you into the NBA, because how else is he getting these players here? They're not putting up the most NIL money in the country. There are a lot of other schools that could pay more money. So what is his selling point? Oh, Memphis has won all these national championships. No, we kind of believe we are bigger and better. I'm talking about the city of Memphis and this program than what it really is. I mean, I know they've had some success, but come on now. Let's not get crazy here. They're not clamoring to come to Memphis, but they are clamoring to come play for Penny when Penny is telling them, listen, I'm the guy because I've been there. I can get you to the NBA. Parth, do you agree?
I agree. And I think maybe I'm just beating a dead horse or belaboring this point, but even the schools that have a ton of money, like your Arkansas, I don't know who else is big in the portal. Alabama, went shopping in the portal. Like those schools aren't recruiting all 1A guys because that doesn't work. It doesn't work at any level. Even in the NBA, you can't have Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Jokic on one team. It would implode. And that's what we're seeing now. You've got to have guys that, okay, you've got to, 1 or 2 of those guys, and everybody else has to fit your culture. And I think Penny just kind of gets these big eyes when he sees talent, which is why we saw him add Naquan Tomlin, a guy who got kicked off his previous school, in December. Bring Jordan Brown back, a guy who literally quit on you, and you open the door to him again. And I think it kind of goes back to, how much talent can I accumulate? Can I this roster more than anybody else in the country? And that's not the end all be all talent.
When the NBA does its homework before a draft and they're looking at investing millions into a guy who's going to be a first round pick, they spend a fortune on investigating that guy. They talk to the old college coaches. They talk to the old high school coaches. They talk to the fringe family members. They talk to everybody to find out about the character of that guy and what he's all about and what drives him and if there's any red flags and all of that. Well, if you're going to take the college game and turn it into the pro game, and you're going to go after 4 guys who are the rough equivalent in your mind of first-round draft picks for your franchise, the college basketball team, then maybe the next step is you got to invest in, finding out who are these guys that I'm getting? Why have they been to 4 schools in 5 years? Why are, why are they leaving 2 Big East schools, and they're not in the, in the draft yet, and they're coming to my place. How are they going to act when they get here? What's going to be their priority? And, when you're just plucking from the portal in a short amount of time, on the football level, the Tigers have what they now call a quote unquote general manager.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can make the argument that Penny's the general manager and all that, but maybe you need an entire department of investigators to find out about these guys you're bringing in from the portal. And it's just crazy. It's spun out of control.
Yeah, but would he listen to him? I mean, that's the question, whether or not he's going to listen to the assistant coach. All right, 2 more topics I want to get to. This was another quote from Penny on the Tigers rotation. The guys that are going to play now, they have to have a care factor for the city and the school. Right now, we want to go to war. So obviously he's equating that the guys who care about the city and care about the program are going to play better. There's going to be more chemistry. I don't know if that goes hand in hand. The bottom line is you're going to have guys that are zipping in here for 8 months and zipping out. Yeah. Some are going to care, some are not going to care. Right? The bottom line is, though, who's putting the effort out there? Who is going out there and fighting every single game like it's their last game? Those are the guys that need to be on the court. So with that said, for Charlotte, Wednesday night, that's tomorrow night as we tape here on Tuesday, Parth, what changes do you expect to see? And will he stay with those changes, or 3 minutes into the game, bring back those other guys?
Yeah, it's hard to say. And Greg, you mentioned kind of guys zipping in and out in 6 to 8 months. I think he was obviously talking about this season, like kind of differentiating who gives a crap and who doesn't, which has become very, very hard to do with this roster. It seems like there was a 5 that was on the court about midway through the second half when Penny realized, hey, this thing is cooked. This thing is over. And I want to say it was Joe Cooper. He was out there for sure. Mm-hmm. Carl Sharonfont, Nicholas Jourdain, Naquan Tomlin, and I'm forgetting who the 5th was. It might have been Jonathan Pierre, but it might have been, man.
I think it was Ashton.
Was it Ashton? I don't think it was Ashton. Ashton played very limited minutes.
Was it Malco?
It wasn't Malco, because the 2 bigs were Tomlin and Jourdain. Cooper was out there for sure, like I said, Sharonfont, and I can't remember the 5th. Let's just say it was Jonathan Pierre. I think that group is perfect. That group cares, right? That group is a group of guys who are gonna, at least try. Like,
you don't think David Jones cares?
Excuse me. David Jones was out there. That's who the 5th was. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. So I guess the player that would be interchangeable here would be either Jonathan Pierre or Carl Sharonfont. But Jones, Jourdain, Tomlin would be fixtures, and you got to have a point guard. So either Jalen Young or Joe Cooper. I think Young is still recovering from that foot injury, that ankle injury that kind of plagued him for 2 games. He was out for 2 games, and then gave it a go against SMU for limited minutes. But if Penny is going to stick by, stand on his word, stand on business, so to speak, like he's going to play those 5 guys. But we've seen Penny say these things before. And you look up at tip-off time, 7 p.m. tomorrow night, and look who's out there, right? Same 5 that we've seen all season. So I don't know. I think I'd be surprised, I'll say that, if Penny not only does it, plays the 5 guys that we're mentioning, some collection of those, but then doesn't check the normal characters in at the 19-10 mark.
And what's the point, Tim? There's no point to that.
There's not. And you know what? That group, well, first of all, Parth and I, and I think this probably should be apparent by now to anybody who listens regularly, Parth and I disagree on David Jones. Parth has him as the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think he's been integral to the issue.
Before he was. I think he's changed now a little bit. If you talk to people just around the program, I think he's
getting double-digit rebounds every game to go along with those points. So he's trying. He's
trying.
There. But I know what he's saying. I know what he's saying.
In any event,
disrupt the flow, but the effort's there.
You throw that group out against Charlotte, maybe you hang in there. You throw that group out against Florida Atlantic, not so much. Against Clemson, against Virginia, no. The other thing that was interesting that Penny pointed out the other day when he was, and I saw the video clips of it from when Parth and the other media were there in Dallas was, you know, he came out after a different home game and he talked about the smaller lineup and all that, and people wrote about it and commented on it and whatnot. But part of his point when he talked about it after the SMU game was when they had that quote unquote smaller lineup, they were using David Jones at the 4. And they got away from that. And I think he wants to be able to have a lineup where he can have David Jones playing that position. And they got away from it after all the craziness that happened in the middle of the season with coming and going and guys getting hurt and everything. And I think more specifically, that's part of the problem as opposed to just this bigger lineup, smaller lineup idea.
It is very interesting you say that. John Crispin from ESPN, who has done a number of Tigers games, he's a terrific analyst. He was on my radio show this morning, Tuesday morning, said almost the same exact thing about that smaller lineup, as you just mentioned, David Jones at the 4 being the most effective lineup. Okay, final thing. For those who have gotten a little bit crazy out there, and I'm talking about, my listeners on my radio show, maybe some who are weekly visitors to our Daily Memphian Tigers podcast, and want Penny Hardaway to be replaced. He's not being replaced. He's not being fired. It's not going to happen. They don't get to the NCAA tournament. There's going to be a lot of criticism, and there should be. It would be an incredibly disappointing season going from number 10 in the country to not in the tournament. That would mean just one tournament win in 6 years. And he is under contract, Parth, as we know, for another 4 seasons. This is, I'm not going to say it's a financially strapped institution, but money is not falling out of their pockets when they're especially looking to raise $50 million to match the Smith family's $50 million donation for the refurbishment and renovations at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. With that said, this is your guy. But I do believe that once the season is done, if it doesn't go the way they planned, and I know the administrators, it's kind of a hands-off thing, but they really need to get with Penny and kind of see what his goals are, what his strategy is. You just talked about kind of going out there in the summer and just taking all these great athletes and putting them on the team and hoping magic will happen. So there has to be more of a sign of direction than what we have seen, because let's be honest, most coaches at the University of Memphis or anywhere in the country that coach 6 years with the expectations for Memphis and had one tournament win would be looking for employment. Parth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about Passner, Josh Passner, before we started recording. The guy was here 7 years, and if I'm not mistaken, at the end of year 6, that seat was not only warm, it was hot, man. It was hot. And, he dipped out of town before they could get him out of town, right, at the end of year 7. And he went, for just being objective and looking at it from a broad perspective, in his first 6 years, he went to 4 tournaments, only won 2 games, but Penny's been to 2. Obviously, he had that COVID year where there was no tournament, but 2 out of 5 available tournaments he's been to. Passner went to 4 out of 6. So obviously the 4 out of 6 is a greater ratio, and his seat was really hot. So yeah, Greg, you're absolutely right. Joe Smith, Joe Blow, whatever, in Penny's position with his record. Yeah, I don't think he'd be looking for employment right now, on February 20th, but I think there would be conversations after the season. He wouldn't be gone, but the administration would intervene and say, hey, man, what's your plan? Like, you have to get it right this season. And I don't think we're even there yet because it's Penny Hardaway, and maybe we shouldn't be there yet because it's Penny Hardaway, because it's the son, the city of Memphis, and, a guy who's done as much, if not more, for the University of Memphis than anybody that I know.
Well said.
But who is Penny going to listen to, I think, is the biggest problem. The people in his life who maybe could get through to him aren't necessarily there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's too proud to listen to it from whatever the media may say or ask. He's too proud to listen to it for what the hater fans might have to say. The administration, frankly, is probably a little scared of him. Just because of what Parth referenced and who he is. I I don't know who there is to sit down and have the intervention with him and say, look, the city loves you. The city wants you to succeed. What's happening right now isn't working how it was originally envisioned. We're still behind you. We're still with you. But you got to think about some things differently. You got to open your mind to some other things. You got to try to see if certain things work as opposed to what you're doing right now. I don't know who leads that intervention.
No, I agree. It's a tough conversation. It happened with Larry Finch, and nobody here on this panel is saying that that's the move they should make after the season. We are not saying that.
No,
we certainly hope it works out. But here's the thing: Penny is too proud to fail. He won't allow failness. He's going to continue to try to get this thing right. But could he be too big to fail? Remember we talked about no, we didn't talk about it, but it was the whole real estate thing and all the failures of the big banks and all that. Is he too big? In other words, people that a normal coach they would come up to as an administrator and talk to him about, where are you going with this? But Penny, they stay away from it because it's Penny. He's powerful. He means so much to the city. Is he too big to fail? That will be an interesting thing as we move forward. But again, for people that think that a move should be made or think a move will be made, they're sadly mistaken. That is not happening. But can he figure it out? All right, real quick, Parth. Real quick. University of Memphis, along with Nike, announcing this launch of the 1 cent Cobra. There's another reason why Penny's such a national brand, a world brand. They don't want to leave. They don't want to part ways with this guy. So they launched this 1 cent co-brand exclusive line of apparel. So what is all that about, and how does it benefit the school, or does it just benefit Penny?
Yeah, I think it benefits the school in the same way as you just said, Greg. It's like kind of part of the allure, the brand, the coolness, the swagger of the University of Memphis, and why some guys, not why they come here ultimately, but why they're aware of who Penny Hardaway is, why they're aware of the University of Memphis, because the 1 cent brand and the sneakers and the foam posits and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's another dimension of that. A lot of fans that when they see the coaching staff wear those polos or those T-shirts, those hoodies, whatever, that have the 1 cent logo with the leaping tiger, I think is what they call it. Like, they comment on my post or pictures or videos and say, hey, where can I get that hat? Where can I get that shirt? Well, they couldn't get those things before, but now they can get them, with that collaboration of 1 cent, Nike, and U of M.
If they are trying to pitch coolness and swagger, I clearly am not their target audience.
You won't be the poster boy, will you? If there's one thing, if anything, that's come out of this tenure right now with Penny, and hopefully it'll be a lot more wins and tournament wins in the future, but it's exposure. They have certainly gotten that exposure, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, with everything that they have gone through from the NCAA tournament, the suspension, all the penalties, the win a couple years ago in the tournament. There's always a story, and it always keeps Parth busy and everybody over at the Daily Memphian, and obviously it keeps us busy here with the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. So, guys, great job. What a week it was, and this week will probably be just as eventful. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it, Greg.
We'll do it again, folks, next week, but make sure to check out our other podcasts at the Daily Memphian. The Daily Memphian's food podcast, Sound Bites. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies podcast, also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Once again, thank you to our producer. That is Natalie Van Gundy. For Parth and Tim, I'm Greg. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week.